Hey, so here it is. This is December 20th, 2017. This is our last show.
I
Not
think I
only
forgot
before
something,
Christmas.
Bob.
What's that?
I got to go shopping. Oh, my
I
goodness.
love you, Mike. You believe me, you're not alone. I'm in there with some necessary things to do, too. And we will not have a live show next week. We never do between the two holidays of Christmas and New Year's. So it's not only our last show before Christmas, it's our last show before New Year's when we get to 2018, believe it or not. But we have a great show planned for tonight. We have outstanding guests here. We're going to start off with our two guests from the State House and the school committee with Connie Van Houten, and it was adorable by her own admission.
Absolutely.
And Mary Heath, who has not been on this channel for 5 years, and she's
that I
here.
take that as a fault on our part. We really should
No, I
have,
don't think it's our part. You know, there was we don't want to go on a whole issue, but she has not been here for reasons that I understand, but we won't go into. But she has these two ladies both have an issue that they deem to be so important and so vital. It's coming right off the bat, as the legislature returns to session on January 3rd, January 4th, and possibly the next Tuesday in Concord to deal with leftover bills from the last session that were retained, which means they were not passed, they were not killed, they were left in limbo, and now they have a chance to come back to life in the beginning of this next legislative session, the second session of the two-year term. Because everybody knows that 2018 was going to be an election year for the nation and for everybody in the state office and federal office in New Hampshire, except for our U.S. senators who, under the Constitution, have 6-year terms.
And this is one cycle where we don't have either of our senators up for election.
We don't have either one. That happens only, once in a 6-year
years?
cycle. It only happens once in the 6-year cycle. But Mike Farley, handsome devil that he is.
I don't know about that.
Christmas spirit evident from his handsome garb.
Broke out the red coat. I don't get to wear this that often.
And he has got something going on the progress report that I found really something I look forward to, and it's all his. It's called the POTUS Report on the Progress Report.
Well, we've got a lot to get to today, so I will jump in really quick.
Go right
for
it.
It's been a while since actually I haven't been on the show for over a month.
Oh my goodness!
One thing and another, but I'm glad to be back. Tonight, I want to talk about something, some technicalities that I've been reading about. It's a story that's kind of developing. I don't think I have all the last word on the information, but having to do with this gigantic tax bill that was passed. The first thing I just want to note is rather snarky and amusing was when the House passed their version of it, the Senate parliamentarian, when it went over to the Senate, determined that there were some provisions in it that did not meet Senate parliamentary muster. So after the Senate passed it, it had to go back to the House for some technical correction, which, it's kind of funny. They needed 2 tries to get it done, but they got it done. But here's the interesting thing I'm reading about. In order to make this bill work, there is a requirement that some Medicare and Medicaid reform take place in order to make the numbers work. And
that reform sounds a bit suspicious.
Well,
to me.
that's the terms that's being used. But the point being that in order to be able to push the Medicare Medicaid reform off to 2019 and not have to take it on during the election year, this tax bill has to be signed in 2018. So it hasn't been signed by the president yet. They had their big party, but he hasn't signed it yet. He wants to sign it after the new year so that they don't have to address the financial issues of the Medicare component until after the election. However, it's more than 10 days between the passage of the bill and the new year. And as some people who may have taken civics many years ago when they offered it, if a bill does not get signed within 10 days, it's considered what they call a pocket veto. So he needs to sign that bill prior to the end of the year. So we'll see.
Well, I had not heard about that.
because
You really
because the
surprised
session
me
the
with
session
this-
is ending. Now,
with this arcane.
I've read 2 paragraphs about this. This is something that's just people are just starting to talk about, but it basically came to the attention of some news reporters when they noticed he didn't sign the bill, and they tried to find out why. So
yeah.
we'll watch this. Maybe come the end of next year when we come back, maybe we'll have a report on that. But keep an eye on that.
Well, that's really something, Mike. I had not heard about this. I don't know whether our guests had.
I'm a little bit
But
over
this
my
is-
head with the technicality of it.
Well,
but,
you may be, but you're way ahead of me on it. I got to tell you that. But we do have two guests that we're very happy to welcome on this show for December 20th. Connie Van Houten, school committee member
For 2 weeks more.
for 2 weeks more and continuing to be a state rep. Mary Heath, a committed advocate for public education and a state rep. And let's see, you have a leadership position too, don't you? Assistant minority leader?
Yes.
Is that right?
No, deputy floor leader.
Deputy floor
Yes.
leader. Okay, and they have a bill that they're very concerned about that we want to lead off on. It has, these numbers don't mean much unless you're a legislator, but it's Senate Bill 193.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And as far as I can tell, what this bill does is authorize the diversion of funds intended to help our public education system, which I must say I think is one of the glories of American civilization is our history of strong public education. Both of these ladies have exemplary careers in public education, helped an awful lot of kids in Manchester, both of them. And this bill, I think, threatens to weaken our commitment to continuing to commit to excellence in public education.
And by the way, a commitment that really can't afford much more weakening. That
No.
commitment has
That's
been
right.
on shaky
You know,
ground for a long
the
time.
truth is, and I'm going to let you ladies talk about this, it seems to me like our public education system is under attack like nothing we've ever seen before. From the Heartland Institute, Koch brothers, Americans for Prosperity. But what is Senate Bill 193, and it leads you to come and join us, and
Okay,
we're happy
thank
to have
you.
you here.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you, Mike. And I just want to thank everyone for listening tonight and wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I'm here to talk about Senate Bill 193. I can't begin to say how upset I am about it. 95% of our students in New Hampshire go to our public schools, and New Hampshire schools are ranked in the top 5 across the country. So things are really good in New Hampshire's educational system. I mean, we have some problems, there are always problems, but what Senate Bill 193 would do, it would take funds from our existing education trust, and those funds would go to an education savings account. Per child, a parent would apply for these funds. The funds would be transferred from the New Hampshire Department of Ed to the savings account. And they'd kind of have like a debit system. And they could use it for a private school, a sectarian school. They could use it for homeschooling, for tutoring, for books, for transportation, a number of different things. Basically, we don't know how this will be monitored. There's an assessment component that's built in. But it's so troubling when we think about our public schools. The adequacy funds have been reduced to our schools. There are school districts across our state are struggling because funds have been reduced. We don't have building aid. Catastrophic aid for special ed students have been reduced.
We've
and
picked up retirement costs as
and
well.
the
They've
pension
been,
cost.
Yeah, shifted down to us
So-
at the local level.
So now all of a sudden we're talking about taking money from our existing education trust. In our Constitution, it says that we cherish our public schools. This doesn't
and
sound.
that was the language that all of the Conway decisions relied upon. That's the
Absolutely.
Claremont
Claremont.
decisions. That's the linchpin
That's
of the
right.
constitutional basis that says that the state has to fund education properly.
And it means more than we just pay lip service to them when we says cherish. It has a lot more meaning than that.
I think it's possible there may be challenges to this should it pass as well because of the religious school aspect and that other aspect that you're
Let me
talking about
ask
as well.
a couple,
Constitutionally,
Sure.
a couple
definitely.
questions about the specifics of it. You say the money will come from an education trust.
The
Can you
trust,
give us a
yes.
little background? How is that funded? What is that typically used for? Why is it that pulling money from that fund of money is going to cause a problem?
Well, as a result of the Claremont decision and the court decision, we came up with a formula for an adequate education. And that drove an amount of money that's budgeted in our biennium budget. And it's called the Education Trust. It's only used for public education. And historically, this is how we've been working. The formula has been tinkered with a lot, so it's been reduced. Like Manchester will lose stabilization this year, which is going to be a big hit. For the city of Manchester, we have about 13,800 students. Of that, approximately half would be eligible for these funds if they were to determine that they wanted to leave the school system. So if that happened, that could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars in state aid that would no longer come to the city of Manchester.
So
Could be devastating.
This trust
Devastating.
is the state aid
Yes,
that it basically equalizes education from poorer communities to more wealthy
it's the
communities.
state property tax, it's driven
And-
by
and
the
we
state
all pay
property
that.
tax. We all pay into it, and then at the local level, we have our own school-based tax.
And so that, actually, some have argued that even as it exists now is not quite as adequate should be.
Absolutely.
And yet, through this bill, SB 193,
Yes.
this bill is going to take money away from that
Yes.
and give it to individuals.
Yes.
Now, those individuals, those kids will no longer be in the public school system, correct?
No,
The
they will
intention
not.
is to
No,
pull
but-
them out.
But the problem with that is, let's say we have 22 schools. Let's say just one student from each of our schools leaves. And let's say an average of $4,000. It's $3,600 roughly for an individual, but there's additional money for a youngster who is special ed.
Yes.
Or a youngster who might be in EL, an English language learner, or in free and reduced lunch.
And we have that in Manchester.
Absolutely,
So you
we
can
have it
count
in
on some of our
multiples.
students.
So it would be basically over $5,000 for each student that would be coming out of Manchester, and it could be possibly as high as $6,000, depending upon the categories. The
Now, I
different
thought
aid-
this bill provided that if public schools were losing something like anything over 1/4%,
Right.
there was supposed to be some compensation.
That's true, Bob, is stabilization. But where is
Why-
that money
Why
going
is
to
that
come
not
from?
working?
Well, we don't know yet. And where is that money going to come from? That is not defined yet. Nobody's talked about where those
Oh,
stabilization
yeah.
funds will come.
Okay.
Will that
All
come
right.
out of the education trust, along with
Well,
funds?
if it does, you haven't picked up anything.
That's right. And in addition, remember, 95% of those funds will go to the student's family for them to use on education. But 5% of those funds go to this ESA, Educational Savings Account. And those funds will run the money because they will, I don't want to say launder, but it's like laundering.
No, administer. Yeah. We'll go with administer.
So that is taking further funds. Why can't these funds be administered out of the Department of Ed? Why? Because public money can't go to private or sectarian schools.
So the Department of Education can only administer public schools
So they're transferring this money to this educational savings account.
and setting up this new bureaucracy.
That's true.
Well, it's actually already in place.
It already is in place. And I also am concerned that this has never been publicly bid out. This agency has just been kind of appointed
Right.
for this purpose. So there's
What's the
been.
agency?
It's called an educational savings account.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's an individual and another employee who oversee it. And right now, it's currently in place for the, there's a business set aside
Oh,
that's.
where they
that-
can make a
yes,
donation
yes,
in lieu of taxes.
Yes.
you know,
And then that
yeah.
money goes to children who are at a certain poverty level. And they have an amount of money that goes to, they can go to a private school. It helps
It's the
them with the
voucher.
tuition.
Right.
It's a tuition
Well,
voucher.
but it's business money that comes through.
It's not state tax money.
That's
It's a
right.
donation. However, they do get a backdoor
Yes.
credit for it.
Right, right.
So this is an effort by indirection to get around the prohibition in the New Hampshire Constitution
That's
Right.
right.
that you can't fund private schools through the use of public monies,
right.
whether they're religious or otherwise.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
So we had that, the first effort being this way to get these quote-unquote donations from business. Now, this is another effort to further degrade the pot of money that the state has been mandated to provide to our public school
Well,
students.
and it takes money from our education trust. We desperately need those dollars in our public schools that
do.
are doing a good job.
We are.
have wonderful things going on in our schools. Is everything perfect? Absolutely not. But when we look at what today, I was just out visiting a school, and it was just a spectacular day. I saw kids actively engaged, the teachers engaged in their learning, wonderful things happening. People are coming. I'm on a legislative committee to study different practices in schools from all across the states. And where are we coming in May? We're coming to the state of New Hampshire because we have such innovative practices in this state.
Yeah.
And people are coming from all over the United States to see what's happening in New Hampshire with competency-based education,
Look at all the
personalization.
awards our schools
That's
have won,
right.
right here in the
That's
city of
right.
Manchester.
That's right.
Not
And if
to
we
mention
cripple
the
them
students.
financially, what are we doing? And
Yeah.
Bob, just to return to your point for a moment, you said 1/4%. The estimate, if we max out at that 1/4%, we will lose $430,000 in this district. And
In
so
the
I was
city of
saying
Manchester.
Yes,
Yes.
and it can only be a few kids from each of our 22 schools to get there, and yet we won't lose a teacher because it might be 2 from this school, 1 from this school. We won't lose a
So
bus
we don't
route.
make up any savings by
Absolutely
having a
not. We'll
decreased
need
student population.
our amount of
Our
funding
fixed costs are still going to be in there.
That's right.
And yet, the
and
money to
reduced
pay for them.
by the
right.
stabilization money that's being taken away. So we're already being reduced in the first place, and now we're going to take in a much larger chunk and come out. And there's really only one way to get that money back.
Well, and what's more
Taxpayers.
concerning
Yeah.
are children with disabilities.
Yes.
Because if a child with a disability takes advantage of this opportunity, if it passes, what they will do is they will sign off from the school district for their rights.
For the EIP and everything
The
else.
IEP.
I'm sorry.
And all of the
Two mistakes
services,
in one show, Bob.
so that they can get the adequacy amount that might be $5,000 or $6,000. Now, as a former assistant superintendent, I did the finances for many children with disabilities, and $5,000 certainly isn't going to cover the level of services that a child with a disability will need for the services to have them move forward. So I'm very concerned. I'm also concerned about schools' ability, non-public schools and sectarian schools' ability to serve the needs of children with disabilities or English language learners. Are they going to get the education that they need? And how do we know? How do we assure, as legislators, we have a responsibility to make sure our students get an adequate education. That's our responsibility.
It's a constitutional requirement.
That's
is.
right. That's right. And can we be sure? Yes, is an assessment built in.
How frequently is the assessment done? Is it annual or?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, according to this. But the definitions are not really definitive. So my feeling is there's so much more that we need to know before we pass this bill. What does it mean for New Hampshire children? What does it mean for our public schools? We need to look. Choice is good. There are all kinds of choice. We need to take this bill and look at it and really understand the full costs. The full costs for children with disabilities, our new American children coming into our schools, and what does it mean for the budgets and municipalities? Before we jump into this is the most aggressive voucher bill ever to pass.
Really?
So let me ask,
Really?
I wanted to talk about that, where it stands. It's a
So
Senate
we
bill.
don't know the ramifications of this thing. You see
We
what
do
you're saying?
not.
There's no fiscal note on it? Or?
There is a fiscal note, and they said it's indeterminable because of the fact we have not done this before. We don't know how many students will take advantage of this. So
But that reinforces your statement. We really
Ex-
don't know. And even the
exactly.
people who are paid to tell us what's
That-
going to happen can't tell us.
It's a lot of
exactly.
conjecture right now.
Financially, anyway.
Exactly.
So this is a Senate bill, and you are in the House of Representatives. So this has passed the Senate. I
Yes.
have
It
to
has
assume?
passed the
It's
Senate.
It has
crossed
been
over.
amended.
So it's a retained
On the
bill we'll
House.
be voting on, and
It's a retained bill. It
it'll be
just
voted on just in the first
we
couple
just
of days in
voted
January.
in committee. It passed by one vote in committee.
That was my next question. Were there additional committee hearings to bring it out of retained bill status, or?
We did not have additional hearings. We had meetings about it. We had a major hearing when initially it came forward and then it was retained. We had over 150 people at that hearing, and I would say that 95% of the people there were against this bill. It came to the House. We just acted upon it at the end of November. We will see it come forward either on January 3rd or 4th.
Coming right up.
That's
Right.
right. It's going to be one of the bills that
So
that we have
who's
to.
pushing this?
Well, the governor is very much in favor of it, and the Republicans seem to be very much in favor of this Senate Bill 193.
Okay.
And yet many school districts are speaking out against. The New Hampshire School Boards Association has taken a stand against.
Yeah,
And so those of us with
didn't we
a,
just get a letter from some school district and
yes.
You did.
Yes.
What was that?
Lisa Witt
Yeah.
is the superintendent in Monadnock.
Monadnock?
Yes.
Yes.
And she
Yes.
responded from the perspective of
Yes.
a parent, teacher, and a superintendent.
Has the Manchester School District weighed in on this bill?
They have not as yet.
I did ask for
Seems
some
like they're
kind
running
of
out
a
of time.
consensus. I asked for some kind of a consensus to carry to Concord, and people were concerned about the amendments that were coming forward, and so we did not end up with a consensus at this point.
The
There is
super-
a division on
The
our board.
Superintendent's Association has come out against this bill, as the NEA, the AFT, the New Hampshire School Boards Association.
Principals Association.
Principals, definitely the Principals
How
Association.
about parents?
Parents are mixed. I would say that I probably received about 500 emails
Wow, that's a lot.
opposed to this. I have received maybe another 50 in favor of it.
Yeah.
The general consensus is don't spend public money on private schools.
That's a pretty simple and good,
Right.
understandable.
Public
That's
funds for
right.
public schools.
No
right.
public
Position.
funds for non-public schools.
Yep.
And I think that's a sacred trust. Our country is built on the power that public education brings, that everyone in this country can receive a free and appropriate education and can become anything they want if they're willing to work hard enough. And public education offers
One of the
that.
glories of American civilization.
That's
right
right.
there.
That's right.
Along with our libraries and, some other things.
That's right.
But public
Great
education,
equalizer. Sure.
from Horace Mann, John Dewey, we could go on and on. And, I guess it's time to take a break, but we got to come back and talk about, what the prospects are, I think.
Well, we can take a break and figure out what we're going to do. That's why we take the break, Bob.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I want to thank you. This is great.
Well, it's great
And
to have
thank
you
you
here.
for listening.
Yeah.
You're such a
appreciate it.
good spokesman. I mean, we've missed
Well,
you.
I'll tell you, education has been my life.
And it's
I love
damn
public
good stuff.
education. I have seen students do remarkably well. They come back after a million years to see me.
Before we take the break, if someone watching wanted to have an impact on this vote, what did they do? Call their state rep, call a lot of state, send an email? What's the best way to
Call
attack
your
this?
state
Speak out.
representative, call the governor's office, and say SB 193 is wrong for New Hampshire.
Yeah.
It's wrong for our children. But definitely call their state rep.
And they can
Okay.
get that on nh.gov.
Yes.
All right, and emails are fine too. The
Yes.
calls may not be
Yeah.
as easy to forward, but the emails are fine. They go through very quickly.
Hey, Brian, is Mark McKenzie here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, we'll take a break, and
We'll take-
when we come back, we'll.
We'll be right with him in just a minute, but we got a little bit more to go here. Mark, welcome. We'll be right with you. Okay, well, this is the progress report for this last show, not only before Christmas, but for the year of the progress report, December 20th. And we've just farewell to two outstanding guest state reps, Connie Van Houten, also a school board committee member for another couple of weeks, and Mary Heath, and they were talking about the mischievous effects, and that's an understatement, of Senate Bill 193. And I wanted to ask them about what their real thoughts were about the prospects for actually defeating this bill when it comes up to the House. It's coming up fast. All the retained bills are coming up to the House, and this is one of them, on January 3rd or January 4th. That's not long after this holiday is over, folks.
You know, Bob, I think it's important that we mention, because it's coming up fast, and second, because, there is a strong Republican majority in our House of Representatives.
A little less strong than they used to be because of the special elections.
But
say.
nevertheless, yes, we've been successful on that end, but and also the governor supports it.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that we heed the advice that Representative Heath told us, call the governor's office.
Yep.
Try and if
Yeah.
constituents can weaken his support for that, that's probably the strongest lever they have.
And we have some Republican reps from New Manchester, like Victoria Sullivan and
Yes, but she voted against funding full-day kindergarten when we already pay for it. You're not going to count on Victoria Sullivan to get any money.
I would
for
like her to hear
Manchester
from
education.
people anyhow. So, folks, this is a live show, and we do welcome calls. Our number is 640-3091, and if you're of an opinion you'd like to participate and discuss that issue, I thought it was very excellently presented by Mary and Connie Van Houten. Please call in, but now we're happy to welcome a new member of the House of Representatives of Manchester, Mark McKenzie. And Mark McKenzie has decided he wants to go from the New Hampshire House to the Congress and the House of Representatives, which seems to me an even more dysfunctional body. So we're going to ask him about that.
First thing is we're going to ask him, what are you thinking?
But Mark has a long and distinguished career of service to the state of New Hampshire. How many years were you the president of AFL-CIO?
About 25.
25 years.
That's right. And
Representing the interests of organized labor in the state of New Hampshire. And
Which in turn represents the interests of all labor in the state of New
and
Hampshire.
I would say more than just labor. I think it represents the interests of, the majority of citizens of the state of New Hampshire, the people that work for a living instead of clip coupons for a living. That's the kind of people that the AFL-CIO cares about. It's more than just their own members, which is one of the glories of our movement here. And Mark has been a distinguished leader for that cause, as you've heard, for a very long time. And now he's decided to throw his hat in the ring to be a congressman from the 1st District, because, as you know, are currently serving, and I guess 4th term, Representative Carol Shea Porter, one of my favorites, I have to say. I think she's a wonderful lady. Has said, for reasons I hope to explore with her sometime, that she's not going to seek re-election. So there's some outstanding candidates seeking this seat in the 1st Congressional District, which I have to add is the more difficult district if you're a Democratic candidate. The 2nd District, which is represented by Annie McLean Custer, tends to be more Democratic. This district, the registration favors the Republicans more than in the 2nd District. But we have had many outstanding people represent this 1st District as Democrats, and maybe Mark McKenzie will be the next one. We don't know, but we're going to talk to him and find out.
no, there's no doubt I'm going to be next.
Bob, I'm reminded of, I think it was a quote from John F. Kennedy, when you see daylight, go for it.
There you go.
When there's an open
Well
seat
done.
and you're a politician,
Yeah.
that's daylight, if I ever did hear of it. So,
Yeah.
and you're one of many. There's quite a few Republicans.
There's a very strong field, I
Quite a
would
few
say.
Democrats running.
You got Chris Pappas, you've got Mindy Mesmer, who's very strong on the issue of, industrial pollution and problems with cancer-causing substances. And there's a lady from Portsmouth who I don't know. You probably do more.
Maura Sullivan, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know her, but she sounded like she has some impressive credentials, although not electoral credentials. And then there's Mark McKenzie, who's, done, as I say, a lot of good for a lot of people in the state of New Hampshire
Well, I appreciate
for
that.
many, many years.
Thank you.
So this is normally a softball question, but maybe in this case it isn't. Why do you want to go to join this dysfunctional body that can't get anything done called the U.S. House of Representatives?
Well, my life has been it's been about pushing back against many of the things that working people, working men and women are interested in. I have a set of skills, and I looked at this point in my life and said, I think that I can hit the ground running in Washington. I have a history of not only of representing workers, but also working in the legislature as an advocate for working issues in the state. I've been a firefighter. I was a firefighter in the city of Manchester for a number of years, more than 25 years. I understand the idea that people in this country want to be treated with dignity and respect. I understand that. That drives a lot of the things that I'm concerned about. And I think it's an opportunity to really take whatever energy I can bring this thing and raise the profile of worker issues and issues that people are critical to the future of our country.
So you talk about worker issues. Why don't you list a few of them for us? What are the worker issues that you're most concerned about?
Well,
I bet
clearly,
it starts with the minimum wage.
well, there's no doubt it starts with minimum wage, but it actually backs up even further than that. I mean, there is a and we see it in the New Hampshire legislature and certainly in the federal government. There is a sense that workers are not important in the mix of things today, that the voices of people who work every day in the shops and in the places around this country, aren't important. And I think this tax bill that just passes
I was just thinking about that.
is an example of how little that they care about everyday people in this economy. And so I think that's one of the things that I'm going to fight for. The idea that health care, which is a major problem in the United States, we make progress, under one administration, and this administration decides they're going to roll it all back and upset, but they don't come up with solutions to how we're going to deal with the issue of health care. My sense is that we need to move towards a system of expanding Medicare, including more people within the system, and start the process of coming up with a system that is really about single payer and the concept that the government should take the profit out of this thing, that we should make sure that drug companies and people who are CEOs and executives of corporations and healthcare are not taking the critical money out of the system that we need. And you need to do that at the federal level. That's a role that the federal government should be playing.
Yeah.
So, and what we've seen in this tax bill is this concept of kind of starve the beast. So we're gonna do the tax cuts, and then a couple of years from now, and everybody knows this, what's gonna come up next is we don't have the money to stabilize Social Security.
So we
The
got to
deficit.
go after the safety net.
So we go after the safety net. So we take people who've worked their whole lives, that are out there today, that are on Social Security, that are on Medicare, and we say there's nothing safe for you, and that this.
Oh, and by the way, your mortgage interest deduction is going to have a cap on it. Oh, and by the way, your state and local taxes deduction is going to have a cap on it. And by the way, that hits nothing but blue states.
Right, and that's right. And so you're pitting the country against
Oh, and
each
by the
other
way,
for
those are the
blue and
states
red.
that give more to the federal government than they take back, so they have to have higher local taxes to take care of their own people because they're giving more away to the federal government.
Well,
so it can go down to Mississippi and Alabama.
Well, and the net result of that is that you're taking money away from people. Where they had an opportunity to reinvest that money, to look at infrastructure improvements, to look at other things in the states, and that's gonna go away. And so all of these critical issues that we face as a nation, whether it's healthcare, infrastructure, fixing our infrastructure, the environment, and all of the problems that we're currently facing, so we need new energy sources, we need to figure out a strategy that we move forward. All of those things that we move ahead under one administration, and then you get somebody that comes in and says, no, that's not the way we think, that we have a much different view of the world. And at what point do you say that? At what point do people say, "Look, my voice as a U.S. senator, or my voice as a state representative, whatever the case may be, is just as important. The people that I represent in New Hampshire and will represent in the U.S. Congress, their voice is just as important." And up until probably 15 years ago, that's how the system worked. People would get together, they'd sit in a room, they'd work things out, and they would come up with a strategy that would be in the best interest of the country, not of the party. And we've lost that. We've undermined that.
Totally lost that, I think.
Lost that concept. And it's a disservice to the government, to the people of this government, and to the country. It's a disservice to our country.
You know, one thing about this tax bill, there's a whole lot we could talk about this tax bill that I guess is it now passed both houses? It's about to.
It's passed, but it hasn't been signed.
You explained that very well, which is very interesting. A little piece on that. But that tax bill eliminates the individual mandate that if you don't get health care, you don't get a penalty.
Right.
And I'm very, very concerned about that, Mark. Are you? I mean, this whole thing is premised on the fact that we have everybody in the system.
Yep.
So those people that are old, like me, and infirm, like him,
Okay, I'll accept that.
I can't. I'm having fun with that.
I can't argue with you,
Are
Bob.
supported by the people who think that they're invulnerable because they're young, which is the fault of the young. They think nothing can ever happen to them. They don't need health care because they're going to be healthy forever, and they're not. But if we don't make those people participate in this system through this could be I don't know what's a body blow to the Affordable Health Care Act, but it's not good.
I mean, it's clearly, this is a checklist they've had for the Republican-controlled Congress has had for a long time. The way I've always thought about health care, and I'm always surprised when I see pictures of people and they're cheering the President of the United States who says, cut Obamacare, cut health care. What I'd like to know is, so when you get sick, who's going to pay the bill? Some of you are going to pay the bill, and you will get sick.
Everybody's going to get sick.
And that's the whole issue that we've been fighting for years. For all the years that I did collective bargaining, healthcare was always an issue in collective bargaining.
Yeah.
And what we used to say is, look, what is the impact of uncompensated care within the system? And they said, you can't raise that because uncompensated care is part of the structure of how we fund healthcare in the state, and we pay the bill. And one thing that the Affordable Care Act did was start the process of rolling some of that back so that people roll into hospitals and they had some coverage. It's patently unfair.
It's the people
Yeah,
who
that's right.
don't take care of covering themselves are freeloaders. That's the word that's been used, and that's what they're doing. They're counting on somebody else to cover it when it happens. However, I heard the enrollment period, I believe, just ended for this year's
5
Obamacare
days ago.
signups. And I heard that there was a heck of a lot of activity. There was a lot of interest. More people were signing up on the exchanges. That the popularity of Obamacare has gone up in the past several months. And I also want to observe that those penalties, although they were increasing, and actually, I think the real issue with cutting them was the impact on revenue that they had. They were not so much of an incentive. A lot of people were saying it's cheaper for me to just pay this penalty than to go and
Yeah, the
and
penalty
get
was
on a
not
program.
stiff enough.
The penalties were not. They were going to get there, but they were not there yet. So.
Yeah.
The point I'm trying to make is I know that the effort was to kill Obamacare, but it may have been too late. They may not have killed it with this one.
Well, and I take I take a little exception to the concept of freeloaders because I think that people really want to do the right thing. And I think that there is the healthcare industry has made it so difficult to get healthcare coverage. And the system, which is the most expensive system in the industrialized world,
Without the best outcomes, by the way.
without the best outcomes, is a system that in and of itself is a system which is robbing people of the resources that they need to invest in their own health care. And as long as there are CEOs are making millions of dollars in health care, as long as the drug companies continue to go unfettered,
This Scully guy that's going to raise the price of a life-saving.
well, exactly. And
He's the poster boy for our side.
and how they, I don't know how these guys sleep at night, but if those are things that drive. The
feather
system
beds.
is broken. And we made some progress with the affordable health care. We made some forward progress. The Republicans want to repeal it, but they never offer. They never offer a solution for the problem with
Yeah,
the
no,
health
they
care.
don't.
They don't offer it. They simply
They
complain.
had 7
if they-
years of 63 repeal votes, and they never came up with an alternative.
And we got ours, they say. We're all set. We're the Congress of the United States. We've got terrific health care.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
what about the rest of the people?
Yeah.
And I hope when they go back to their districts that they cut the spin and that they talk to people about really what they just did in Washington, because the people will be outraged.
You think that's going to happen?
I think the people are going to demand it. I mean, we're at the age that we know that people have reeled against inequity in this country.
Yeah.
They have stood
Well,
up.
Did you see in the president in the White House press briefing? Sarah Huckabee Sanders was asked, the president says that this tax bill is bad for him, but that's not true. And she wouldn't, you can ask all you want. They're not going to tell the truth.
Yeah,
Well, that's
I
right.
think there's a whole book that could be written about some of her statements that she's made in defense of this president, which is absolutely outrageous.
And I look at the background, the sanctimonious background she comes from.
Just tell the truth. Don't.
It's kind of the
spin it.
first thing, isn't
Tell
it?
the truth. That's all. That's your responsibility as somebody who communicates a message. Tell the truth.
Yeah, you're right. So I'm still left wondering, Mark, but I think your answer is going to be you think you're going to have a lot of help in the next Congress. But if you were elected to this Congress, it would be the ultimate, I would think it would be the ultimate frustration. If you had to deal with a Republican majority, if you were successful in winning the nomination and then winning the election, and the Republicans in control, I think you'll wish you had never done it.
Well, let me say this. I think I'd be more frustrated if I didn't try.
Yeah.
I think that the idea that I had an opportunity to bring the skill set that I have to be able to raise a strong voice on behalf of the people of the state of New Hampshire, and I didn't do that. I think that I'd be, I would be more uncomfortable than the thought of doing what I've always done, which is to confront power and to deal with that. I can do it. I've done it a long time. I understand it. Sometimes you win, sometimes you don't. But basically standing up is the thing that builds respect for you and for the people that you represent.
Well,
And
you've
we
done
got a
that
lot
all
to
your
stand up
life.
for.
I agree. You certainly have. How are you going to make your stand out from the other candidates that are seeking this nomination?
You got to look back. You got to look at who I am and where I come from and what I've done. You've got to look at the experience that I've had, not only as a firefighter, and that experience in and of itself is instilled in me a sense of responsibility to people, of community service to people, about treating people with dignity and respect. I understand. I've been in their homes. I've talked to them a lot. I've had those kinds of experiences, and it was a tremendous honor to do that. And I work with some of the finest people that this city has and the state has. I also think that I come with a record of understanding politics, understanding how to get things done, how to bring people to a place where they can be empowered, building coalitions, building groups of people, and giving them a voice, as I've done for all the years that I've been there. Give them a voice. Yeah. And, this is not going to be easy. But nothing I've ever dealt with in terms of politics or moving forward has ever been easy. And I tell the story, you start collective bargaining, you start with one page. The front page of a collective bargaining agreement basically says management has all the power. And then you spend that number of years taking that and giving it balanced in a balanced way back to the employees. And that's what my life has been. So if this is the first page, we're going to do what we got to do. We're going to fight in a way that I don't think, I think that I bring a lot to this campaign and a lot of energy and a lot of enthusiasm.
Well, I'm sure you're going to be a very enthusiastic and, I hope, joyful campaigner.
There you go.
That's important.
I don't know how much time we have because I can't see, but, we should talk about climate. I mean,
I want to talk about climate. I also wanted to talk about the opioid crisis.
Sure.
And you can pitch whichever one you want to start in on. Because
let's just talk real quickly about climate.
Yeah, we're just getting a notice. We've got about 6 minutes left.
Okay, so the issue of climate, if nothing else comes from this show, if nothing, people don't remember anything, please take a minute and realize that this country is on the verge of poisoning the water we drink, the air that we breathe, the ground that grows our products, and everything about this country. We're on a tipping point. You can ignore that. You could say it's not happening. But to ignore it, really, I think, is to say, is to close your eyes and pretend that it doesn't exist. And so let's do this. Let's figure out a way to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. I absolutely agree with that.
We got to do it.
We got to do it, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, there's going to be some balance you got to create between environmentalists and workers, and that's the balance that we need to achieve.
Stockholders.
Right, and the stockholder. But we need to make some decisions about how we're going to proceed. And we got to take advantage of all the technology is out there, and we got to build a whole new industry with workers who are going to be put on jobs that pay well, and rebuilding the infrastructure of our country. And finally, let me say this: the opiate crisis. I worked with a lot of people in the fire department over the years. Drug abuse and alcohol abuse is not new to the fire service. We've dealt with that issue. We dealt with it a long period of time. What we're having now, and I don't think there's any simple solution to it. I think that we have major problems within the society in which we live. The 40% of the children in Manchester live in single households, single-parent households. We have people working 2 and 3 jobs. We have an economy that's not paying people well. And so a lot of people, unfortunately, can't spend the time and attention potentially that would benefit themselves and their families. And I think that we have to recognize that that's having an impact on it. But I don't think we're going to solve this today or tomorrow. The crisis with this, there has to be an understanding that this is a long time to change the behavior of people. But in the meantime, it's an enormous crisis that we face. Friends of mine, colleagues of mine in the fire service, have that doorbell ring every single day, day after day after day, and people are rolling in there. And thank God there's a system in place that helps them, because I don't know what could have happened to them.
You're talking about safe stations?
Safe stations, exactly. And what would have happened to many of these people had not been in place?
A great success, but you're focusing on the bottom end of the problem.
Right.
The pharmaceutical industry is churning these opioid pills out, dumping them on communities, setting up these pain clinics that just dispense, and then the next thing you know, We have a problem in our parks. We have a problem at our firehouses.
Exactly, and I was on the Workers' Compensation Appeals Board for 20 years. I saw that evidence exactly. I saw the tipping point. Many people got hooked on opiate. And when I raised the issue about what's your responsibility as an industry, as a workers' comp industry, what's your responsibility to those people who got hooked on drugs as part of the treatment program, and they walked out of the room. Because nobody wants to talk about, if you're on workers' comp and you're injured and you get hooked on opiates as a result of the treatment program that you have, somebody owes you, and that's part of your treatment, and it should be in this country.
Yeah.
Well, glad to hear you say that. Very glad to hear you
I
say
certainly want to applaud you for bringing up the climate issue, Mark.
Thank
I think
you.
that's maybe the greatest issue of our time, and too many people just don't realize
that. You know,
it.
Bob, I heard just this past week that the U.S. Navy is actually beginning the process of raising the level of docks at some of our major naval installations, because they got to if they're going to be done
Newport
in
News in
Newport
Virginia.
News, if they're going to be done in time, they got to start now.
Yeah.
And this is not 100 years away. We're talking within the next 20 or 25 years. This is going to the sea level is going to rise to and if the predictions are even close, you're going to start burying underwater. You're going to have communities underwater, and potentially have cities underwater.
Oh, that beautiful new waterfront of Boston doesn't stand a chance.
There you go.
Lots of
New Orleans
waterfronts
and
don't.
places in the Gulf and places like that, Florida. I mean, it's happening. It's happening in this country.
So what's your campaign looking like? Where do you go from here?
Well, campaigns are about a couple of things: getting out so people know you, and reintroducing myself as not only a member who's represented workers for a long period of time, but a candidate. And that's different because I'm not usually talking about. I usually talk about the issues a lot of times, and now it's a matter of talking about how I connect with the issues. And then, of course, it's getting people to buy into the campaign, buying in terms of financial buy-in, and buying into a campaign that really is about us. And that's the way that I want to run this. This is not my campaign. This is our campaign. And so we're starting to make progress. I'm getting good support from people that have known me for a long period of time. I'm excited about it.
You've got a lot of good things in your past that I think people
You have as
attract
well.
you.
I remember all of that, too.
Yeah. Well, folks, we've come pretty close to the end of this. I just wanted to end up with a couple of things. Number one, I'm posting every week on my Facebook page, and I usually try on the Progress Report Facebook page, to what our show is about. So I hope you'll check out my Facebook page or the Progress Report, which, thanks to Mike Farley, we do have a Facebook page, and we'd like to have it more active. So you can check in with us and see what's coming up, which will not be, for another couple of weeks, because this is going to be our last show for the year, as I've mentioned. And lastly, I'd say, Mark well led into it. We have coming up right at the beginning of the new legislative session a whole bunch of retained bills from our Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. Some of them are really horrible, like killing off the RGGI program, which is the program that we had that is working for this part of the country, the Northeast, to address climate change. We gotta defend that, and defend our energy efficiency efforts in the state of New Hampshire, which is our best energy option. And I'd love to talk more about that, but
how about saying Merry Christmas?
Oh, Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas, everybody, and have a wonderful holiday. And I hope you have a wonderful gathering with your family wherever you are.
Happy Christmas and a very new year.
There you
A
go.
very new
Merry
year.
Christmas.
Okay.